Hey, gorgeous. Want to ride?
The attic light shouldn't have been on. I stood in my driveway at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, staring up at that goddamn yellow glow seeping through the unfinished floorboards above our garage. 3 days I'd been gone on what turned out to be the most pointless business trip of my 48-year life, trying to sell industrial cleaning supplies to hotels that had already made up their minds before I walked through their doors. Classic waste of time, classic waste of money, classic Bob Mitchell getting his hopes up for nothing. But that light was new. My wife, Marta's Honda, was in the garage, along with my brother Alan's beat-up Chevy truck. Nothing unusual there. Alan had been crashing with us on and off for the past 6 months, ever since his latest girlfriend kicked him out for being, in her words, a 44-year-old man-child with commitment issues and a drinking problem. Can't say she was wrong. I grabbed my duffel bag from the back seat and headed for the front door, keys jingling in the suburban silence. The house looked the same as always. Two-story colonial, white siding that needed power washing, flower beds that Marta had given up on sometime around our 15th wedding anniversary, home sweet home in beautiful Millbrook, Ohio, where dreams come to die slowly and quietly. The front door was unlocked. Another thing that shouldn't have been. "Marta?" I called out, dropping my bag in the entryway. "I'm back." No answer. The living room was dark, television off, Marta's reading glasses folded neatly on the coffee table next to a half-empty wine glass. Red wine. The expensive stuff she only drank when she was stressed about work or celebrating something. I checked the kitchen. Clean dishes in the drying rack. A note on the refrigerator in Marta's handwriting. Grocery list. Milk, bread, wine, rubbers. I read it twice before it sank in. We hadn't used rubbers in 20 years. That's when I heard it. A soft thump from above, followed by muffled voices, coming from the attic. The pull-down ladder was already extended, hanging into the hallway like an invitation I didn't want to accept. But curiosity eliminated the cat, and apparently it was about to eliminate Bob Mitchell's marriage, too. I climbed up slowly, each wooden step creaking under my weight. The attic had been unfinished for as long as we'd owned the house. Just exposed beams, pink insulation, and boxes of Christmas decorations. Or at least, that's what it used to be. Now it looked like a goddamn love nest. Someone had laid down plywood flooring, hung string lights from the rafters, and set up a queen-sized air mattress, complete with actual sheets and pillows. Real pillows, not the cheap foam ones we kept in the guest room. A mini-fridge hummed in the corner next to a small TV on a folding table. Empty beer bottles lined the windowsill, and the whole space smelled like Zex and Allen's cologne. On the makeshift nightstand, I found a stack of greeting cards held together with a rubber band. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Happy Father's Day to the best uncle ever, in my daughter Amelia's handwriting. Thanks for always being there for us, Uncle Alan, from my son Ross. We love you so much. From both kids, with little hearts drawn around the words, Uncle Alan. Not Uncle Bob, Uncle Alan. I was still staring at the cards when I heard Marta's car pulling into the driveway. I shoved the cards back where I found them, eliminated the lights, and climbed down as quietly as I could. By the time she walked through the front door, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch late-night television. "Bob!" She seemed genuinely surprised to see me. "I thought you weren't coming back until tomorrow." "Change of plans," I said, studying her face. She looked good, better than she had in months. Her hair was freshly styled, makeup perfectly applied even at midnight. She was wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the one she claimed made her look fat. "Where were you?" "Book club ran late," she said without missing a beat. "You know how Linda gets when she's had wine?" Linda Morrison had moved to Florida 6 months ago. "Right," I said. "Book club." Marta kicked off her heels and headed for the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Coming to bed?" "In a minute," I said. "Just want to catch the news." She paused at the bottom of the stairs, one hand on the banister. For a moment, I thought she might say something else. Instead, she just nodded and disappeared upstairs. I waited until I heard the bedroom door close, then grabbed my binoculars from the hall closet. Yeah, I owned binoculars. Sue me. I used them for bird watching, which was apparently the only hobby left for middle-aged men who'd given up on everything else. From the living room window, I had a perfect view of the attic. The light came back on about 10 minutes later, followed by 2 silhouettes moving around up there. One was definitely Alan. Tall, lanky, that stupid man bun he'd been sporting since his midlife crisis began. The other was smaller, curvier, wearing what looked like lingerie. My wife of 22 years was screwing my brother in our attic. I sat there watching them for I don't know how long. feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not heartbreak. I'd save that for later. This was something else. Something that felt like the moment right before you pull the trigger on a hunting rifle, when everything goes quiet and still and you know there's no going back. Finally, the light went out, and the silhouettes disappeared. I put the binoculars away and went to bed, where Marta was already asleep, or pretending to be. She smelled like shower gel and guilt. I lay there staring at the ceiling until dawn, making plans. The next morning, Marta left for work at her usual time. 7:30 sharp, travel mug of coffee in one hand, phone in the other, already deep in conversation with someone from the advertising agency where she was a senior account manager. She'd been there for 15 years, working her way up from assistant to what she called the woman who makes other people's dreams come true for a living. Mostly, she made commercials for car dealerships and furniture stores, but she talked about it like she was running Madison Avenue. Alan stumbled downstairs around 9, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. His hair was sticking up in 17 different directions, and he was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. He had that post-Zex glow that made me want to punch him in his stupid face. "Morning, Bobby," he said, heading straight for the coffee maker. "Didn't know you were back." "Got in late last night," I said, not looking up from my newspaper. "Sleep well?" He paused, coffee mug halfway to his lips. "Yeah, like a baby. You know me, I can sleep anywhere." "Even in an attic?" The mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the kitchen floor. Coffee splashed across the white tiles like blood at a crime scene. "Crap," Alan muttered, grabbing paper towels. "Sorry about that. Butterfingers." I folded my newspaper and stood up. "I'll be at the shop if anyone needs me." Mitchell's Industrial Cleaning Solutions occupied a strip mall unit between a tax preparation service and a place that sold nothing but different kinds of soap. I'd started the business 12 years ago with a small business administration loan and a dream of being my own boss. The dream had mostly turned into a nightmare of late payments, demanding customers, and the constant fear that Amazon would figure out how to deliver industrial floor wax cheaper than I could. But it was mine, and it gave me a place to think. I spent the morning calling customers and pretending to care about their cleaning supply needs, but my mind kept drifting back to that attic. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Around noon, I decided to do some reconnaissance. Marta worked at Brennan and Associates, a mid-sized agency in downtown Columbus. I'd been there exactly twice, once for a Christmas party where everyone pretended to like each other, and once to pick her up when her car was in the shop. It was one of those modern office buildings with too much glass and not enough soul, filled with people who used words like synergy and paradigm shift without irony. I parked across the street and waited. At 12:15, Marta emerged from the building with a man I didn't recognize. He was younger than me, maybe 35, 40 at most, with the kind of artificially perfect appearance that screamed, "I spend more on hair products than most people spend on groceries." They walked to a restaurant 2 blocks away, and I followed at a distance. Through the window, I watched them share a bottle of wine and laugh at each other's jokes. He touched her hand across the table. She didn't pull away, so it wasn't just Alan. My wife was collecting lovers like some women collect shoes. I drove home and climbed back up to the attic, this time with a purpose. I took pictures of everything, the bed, the cards, the empty bottles. I found a receipt from Victoria's Secret stuffed in an empty beer bottle. Lingerie, charged to our joint credit card. Marta had bought Zexy underwear and charged it to my account so she could wear it for other men. That cold, hard feeling in my chest grew a little bigger. In the mini fridge, I found more evidence. A bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon, the kind that costs more than I made in a week. A card attached to the neck read, "To many more adventures, love AP. AP Mr. Hair products from the restaurant." I was photographing the card when I heard Alan's truck in the driveway. I quickly put everything back where I'd found it and climbed down, pulling the ladder up behind me. Alan came through the front door carrying grocery bags. "Hey, Bobby, thought I'd cook dinner tonight, as a thank you for letting me crash here." "That's thoughtful of you," I said. "What's the occasion?" He started unpacking groceries. Steaks, asparagus, potatoes, another bottle of that expensive wine. "No occasion, just felt like being nice." "Must be nice to be able to afford ribeye on unemployment benefits." Alan's hands stilled on a package of meat. "I've been picking up some construction work. Cash jobs, you know how it is." "Sure," I said. "Cash jobs." We stared at each other across the kitchen island. For a moment, I thought he might confess everything. Instead, he just smiled, that same charming smile that had been getting him out of trouble since we were kids. "You seem tense, Bobby. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," I said. "Just perfect." That evening, the three of us sat around the dinner table like a normal family. Alan had outdone himself. The steaks were perfectly cooked, the wine was flowing, and Marta was laughing at his stories about his construction jobs that probably didn't exist. She kept touching his arm when she laughed, right in front of me, like I was invisible. "This is nice," she said, raising her glass. "We should do this more often." "To family," Alan said, clinking his glass against hers. "To family," Marta agreed. They both looked at me expectantly. I raised my glass and smiled. "To getting what you deserve," I said. "I've always been a patient man. You have to be in my line of work. Industrial cleaning supplies don't sell themselves, and customers don't always pay on time. You learn to wait, to watch, to plan your moves carefully. Patience had kept my business afloat for 12 years, and now it was going to help me destroy my marriage with the precision of a surgical strike. The first thing I did was open my own bank account. I'd been putting money aside for months anyway, skimming a little here and there from the business account for what I'd told myself was an emergency fund. Turns out infidelity qualified as an emergency. The second thing I did was start documenting everything. Times, dates, photographs, credit card statements. I bought a small digital recorder and started carrying it everywhere. In Ohio, you only need one party's consent to record a conversation, and I was always willing to give myself permission. The third thing I did was call my old friend Hank Rodriguez. Hank owned a boxing gym on the south side of Columbus, in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but still had enough fight left in it to be interesting. We'd known each other since high school, back when we both thought we were going to be somebody important. He'd ended up training fighters who almost made it to the big time, and I'd ended up selling cleaning supplies to people who didn't want them. But Hank was solid, and he was discreet, and he understood that sometimes a man needed to hit something before he did something stupid. "Bob Mitchell," Hank said when I walked into his gym. "Haven't seen you in what, 2 years?" "Something like that," I said, looking around. The place hadn't changed much. Heavy bags hanging from the ceiling, speed bags mounted on platforms, the smell of sweat and leather and dreams deferred. "You still give lessons to old men having midlife crises?" "Depends on the old man," Hank said, grinning. "And depends on the crisis. What's eating you?" I told him everything. About the attic, about Marta, about Alan, about Mr. Hair Products and his champagne. Hank listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. "Jesus, Bob," he said when I finished. "That's screwed up, even for family. Tell me something I don't know." "You want my advice? That's why I'm here." Hank walked over to one of the heavy bags and gave it a solid punch. "Divorce her. Take half of everything, pay your child support, and move on with your life. You're 48, not 88. You've got time to start over." "The kids aren't mine," I said. Hank stopped punching the bag. "What?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the photos I'd taken of the cards. Look at the handwriting. Look at what they call him. Best uncle ever. Thanks for always being there for us. This has been going on for years, Hank. Maybe since the beginning. You don't know that for sure. I ordered DNA tests, I said. They should be here tomorrow. Hank stared at me for a long moment. And if they prove what you think they're going to prove, then I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they are. Revenge is a dangerous game, Bob. So is infidelity. Hank handed me a pair of boxing gloves. Let's see if we can work some of this anger out before you do something you can't take back. I spent the next hour knocking the hell out of that heavy bag, imagining it was Alan's face. Then a .P quote. S face, then Marta's. By the time I was done, my hands were sore, my shirt was soaked with sweat, and I felt clearer than I had in days. Better? Hank asked. Getting there, I said. That night, I cooked dinner for the family. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs, the kind of comfort food that makes people feel safe and loved. Marta complimented the sauce, and Alan went back for seconds. They both seemed relaxed, happy even. Why shouldn't they be? They had everything they wanted, each other, my money, my house, my trust. After dinner, I suggested we watch a movie together. Like old times, I said. We settled on the couch, Marta in the middle, Alan on one end, me on the other. I'd chosen the movie carefully, Fatal Attraction, because I have a sense of humor about these things. Marta didn't seem to get the irony, but Alan kept shifting uncomfortably every time Glenn Close appeared on screen. Halfway through that movie, Marta's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. "Work?" I asked. "Just a friend," she said, typing a quick response. "AP?" I asked casually. Marta's fingers froze on the keyboard. "What?" "Your friend. Is it Apia?" She looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do," I said. "AP, the one who sent you champagne. The one you had lunch with yesterday." The color drained from Marta's face. Alan reached for the remote and paused the movie. "Bob," Marta said carefully, "I think you're confused." "I don't think I am," I said. "I think I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years." "Maybe we should talk about this privately," she said, glancing at Alan. "Why?" I asked. "We're all family here, right? No secrets between family?" Alan cleared his throat. "I should probably head upstairs." "No," I said, standing up. "I think you should stay. I think you should both stay and listen to what I have to say." But they were already moving, Marta heading for the kitchen, Alan heading for the stairs. I let them go. There would be time for confrontations later when I had all my evidence in order. The DNA test kits arrived the next morning while Marta was at work and Alan was presumably job hunting, though I suspected he was actually shopping for more champagne. I swabbed my cheek, sealed the sample in its little tube, and sent it off to the lab along with hair samples I'd collected from my children's bedrooms. Then I sat down and started making a list of everyone who needed to know the truth about my wife and brother. It was a longer list than I'd expected. The DNA results came back on a Thursday. I was in my office, trying to focus on an order for floor wax, when the email arrived. I stared at the subject line for a full minute before opening it. Paternity test results, confidential. Ross Mitchell, 99.9% probability of paternity, Amelia Mitchell. 0% probability of paternity. My son was mine, my daughter wasn't. I printed out the results and drove home, where I found Alan washing his truck in the driveway. He was shirtless, showing off the tattoos he'd gotten during his last midlife crisis, an eagle on his back, barbed wire around his bicep, the kind of ink that looked tough on a 20-year-old and ridiculous on a man pushing 50. "Afternoon, Bobby," he called out. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Beautiful," I agreed, walking past him into the house. I climbed up to the attic and placed the DNA results on the makeshift nightstand, right next to the champagne bottle and the greeting cards. Then I went back downstairs and waited. Marta got home at 6:30, later than usual. She claimed she'd been in meetings all day, but I could smell a .P quote, S cologne on her clothes. She kissed my cheek like she had every day for 22 years, and I let her. "How was your day?" she asked, hanging up her coat. "Enlightening," I said. We had dinner, leftover Chinese takeout, and made small talk about work and the weather and whether we should finally finish the basement. Normal married couple conversation, the kind we'd been having for decades. Alan joined us, freshly showered and wearing a clean shirt, playing the role of grateful brother-in-law to perfection. After dinner, Marta announced she was going upstairs to take a bath. "I'm exhausted," she said. "Don't wait up." I gave her 30 minutes, then followed her upstairs. The bathroom door was closed, and I could hear water running. I knocked gently. "Marta, can we talk?" "I'm in the bath, honey. Can it wait?" "It's important." A pause, then the sound of water sloshing. "Come in." She was lying in our oversized bathtub, surrounded by bubbles and candlelight. It was a scene from a romance novel, or maybe a homicide mystery. She looked beautiful and guilty and completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. "What's so important that it can't wait?" she asked. I sat down on the edge of the tub and pulled out the DNA results. "I found something interesting in the attic." Marta went very still. "What were you doing in the attic?" "Looking for answers," I said. "And I found them." I unfolded the papers and held them where she could see them. She read in silence, her face going through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally, resignation. "Bob," she said quietly, "I can explain." "Can you?" I asked. "Can you explain how my daughter isn't my daughter? Can you explain the love nest in our attic? Can you explain AP and his champagne and your lunch dates?" Marta closed her eyes. "How long have you known? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." "A week," I said. "I've known for a week, and I've spent that week wondering how I could have been so stupid for so long." Marta sat up in the tub, water and bubbles cascading off her shoulders. "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," I said. "You're screwing my brother. You're also screwing some guy from work. And my daughter, the little girl I taught to ride a bike and helped with her homework and walked down the aisle at her high school graduation, isn't actually mine. She is yours, Marta said desperately. Biology doesn't matter. You raised her. You love her. Does she know? Know what? Does Amelia know that her father is actually her uncle? Marta's silence was answer enough. I stood up and walked to the bathroom door. Get dressed, I said. We're going to have a family meeting. 20 minutes later, we were all gathered in the living room, me, Marta, and Alan. I'd called the kids and asked them to come over, telling them we had something important to discuss. They'd both sounded worried, which was appropriate given the circumstances. Ross arrived first. He was 21, a junior at Ohio State studying business, and he looked like a younger version of me. Same brown hair, same blue eyes, same tendency to worry too much about things he couldn't control. He hugged his mother and shook hands with Alan, then sat down next to me on the couch. What's this about, Dad? He asked. Let's wait for your sister, I said. Amelia showed up 15 minutes later, still wearing her work uniform from the restaurant where she waited tables to pay for community college. She was 19, beautiful in the way that young women are beautiful without trying, with Alan's dark hair and Marta's green eyes. Looking at her now, knowing what I knew, I wondered how I'd never seen the resemblance before. Sorry I'm late, she said, kissing everyone hello. We were slammed tonight. Some idiot ordered 50 wings 5 minutes before closing. Sit down, sweetheart, Marta said, patting the cushion next to her. When everyone was settled, I pulled out the DNA results and set them on the coffee table. I want to start, I said, by saying that I love you both. Ross, Amelia, you are the best things that ever happened to me, and nothing I'm about to say changes that. Ross leaned forward, studying the papers. Dad, what is this? DNA test results, I said. I had them done because I discovered some things that made me question, well, everything. Amelia picked up the papers and read them, her face growing pale. I don't understand. It means, Alan said quietly, that I'm your biological father. The silence that followed was deafening. Ross stared at Alan like he'd never seen him before. Amelia looked back and forth between Alan and Marta, her mouth opening and closing without making any sound. How long? Ross asked finally. 20 years, Marta whispered. 20 years, Ross repeated. You've been lying to us for 20 years. We didn't mean for it to happen, Alan said. It just happened. Bull crap, Ross said, standing up. Things like this don't just happen. You made choices. You made choices every single day for 20 years. Amelia was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Does this mean you're not my dad anymore? She asked me. My heart broke a little more. You will always be my daughter, I said. Always. That will never change. But I'm also his daughter, she said, looking at Alan. Yes. And you're my uncle. Yes. And my mom is... She couldn't finish the sentence. Your mom made mistakes, I said. We all make mistakes. This isn't a mistake, Ross said angrily. This is betrayal. This is 20 years of betrayal. He stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Amelia followed a few minutes later after hugging me and whispering, I'm sorry, in my ear, like any of this was her fault. When they were gone, the three of us sat in silence. Finally, Alan spoke. What happens now? I looked at him, this man who had been my brother, my friend, my houseguest, and my wife's lover. Now, I said, you pack your things and get the hell out of my house. Bob? Now, I said again, and something in my voice made him stand up and head for the stairs. Marta and I watched him go. When we heard his footsteps on the attic ladder, she turned to me. What about us? She asked. There is no us, I said. There hasn't been an us for 20 years. I just didn't know it. We can work through this, she said. We can go to counseling. We can... No, I said. We can't. I stood up and headed for the door. Where are you going? Marta called after me. To see a lawyer, I said. And then I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you are. Bob, please, think about the kids. I stopped at the door and turned back to her. I am thinking about the kids, I said. I'm thinking about how they deserve better than parents who lie to them for 20 years. Then I left, and I didn't look back. I spent that night in a hotel room, staring at the ceiling and planning my next moves. By morning, I had a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. The first call I made was to my lawyer, a woman named Patricia Wells, who specialized in divorce cases and had a reputation for being tougher than a $2 steak. I'd never needed a divorce lawyer before, but I'd heard stories from other men who'd been through this particular circle of hell. "Mr. Mitchell," Patricia said when I walked into her office, "I understand you have a complicated situation." "That's one way to put it," I said, and I told her everything. Patricia listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and whistled softly. "In 30 years of practicing family law," she said, "I've seen a lot of ugly situations, but this is special." What are my options? Well, the good news is that Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, which means you don't have to prove infidelity to get divorced. The bad news is that it also means the infidelity won't necessarily affect the division of assets. What about the kids? Ross is over 18, so custody isn't an issue. Amelia is 19, so same story. However, if you've been paying for her college expenses, you might be able to argue that you shouldn't be responsible for future payments, given that she's not biologically your child. "I don't want to stop paying for her college," I said. "She's still my daughter." Patricia nodded approvingly. "That's very noble of you. It will also look good to a judge if this gets ugly." "Oh, it's going to get ugly," I said. "I'm going to make sure of that." The second call I made was to my accountant, a nervous little man named Ted who'd been handling my business finances for years. I had him transfer most of the money from our joint accounts into my new personal account. Technically, it was my money anyway. Marta made decent money at the agency, but I'd been the primary breadwinner for our entire marriage. The third call I made was to Hank. "How'd it go?" he asked. "About as well as you'd expect," I said. "I need a favor." "Name it." "I need you to help me find out everything there is to know about a guy named AP who works at Brennan and Associates." "What kind of everything?" "Everything. Where he lives, what he drives, who he's sleeping with besides my wife, what his weaknesses are. Everything." Hank was quiet for a moment. "Bob, you sure you want to go down this road?" "I'm already on this road, Hank. The question is whether I'm going to walk or run." "All right," he said. "Give me a couple days." While Hank was doing his detective work, I started phase 2 of my plan. Social warfare. Millbrook, Ohio, population 12,847, was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. Information traveled faster than gossip, and gossip traveled at the speed of light. I'd lived here for 15 years, long enough to know exactly how the rumor mill worked and who operated the machinery. My first stop was the grocery store, where I accidentally ran into Linda Patterson, the biggest gossip in town. Linda had been trying to get dirt on my family for years, mostly because her own life was boring enough to make watching paint dry seem exciting. "Bob," she said, practically pouncing on me in the produce section, "how are you holding up?" "Holding up?" I asked, playing dumb. "Well, you know," she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "with everything that's been going on." "I'm not sure what you mean, Linda." She looked disappointed. "Oh, I thought you knew about Marta and that man from her work." "What about them?" Linda's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but my cousin works at that restaurant downtown. You know the one. And she saw them there last week. Very cozy, if you know what I mean." "Cozy how?" "Holding hands, kissing, acting like teenagers." Linda paused dramatically. "I'm so sorry, Bob. I assumed you knew." "I appreciate you telling me," I said, putting on my best wounded husband expression. "I had no idea." "Men never do," Linda said sympathetically. "We women are better at picking up on these things." By the end of the week, half the town knew that Marta Mitchell was having an affair with someone from work. By the end of the following week, thanks to a few more carefully planted conversations, they also knew about Alan. The beauty of small-town gossip is that it grows in the telling. By the time the story made its way back to me through other sources, Marta wasn't just having an affair. She was running a brothel out of our attic. And Alan wasn't just my brother. He was the father of both my children and possibly involved with a pill cartel. I didn't correct any of the more outlandish rumors. Why spoil a good story? Meanwhile, Hank had been busy with his research on AP, whose full name turned out to be Andrew Phillips. Andy was 36, divorced, drove a BMW, and lived in an expensive condo downtown. He'd been with Brennan and Associates for 8 years, working his way up from junior account executive to senior partner through a combination of talent, ambition, and sleeping with the right people. "Guy's got a reputation," Hank told me over beers at his gym. "This isn't his first affair with a married woman. Word is, he considers it a hobby." "What else?" "He's got gambling debts. Big ones. Owes money to some people who don't take IOUs. How big? 6 figures big. Interesting. A man with gambling debts was a man with pressure points. Anything else? He's got a temper. Got arrested for attack 3 years ago. Charges were dropped, but the report's still on file. Seems he doesn't like being told no. Perfect. I spent the next few days following Andrew Phillips, learning his routines, figuring out his vulnerabilities. He had lunch at the same restaurant every Tuesday, worked out at an expensive gym every Thursday, and spent Friday nights at a casino an hour outside the city. On the third Friday, I followed him to the casino and watched him lose $3,000 at the blackjack tables. He was a terrible gambler, the kind who doubled down when he should have folded, who let emotion override logic, who thought he could beat the house through sheer force of will. He was also a mean drunk. I watched him berate a cocktail waitress for bringing him the wrong drink, then tip her $5 like that made up for treating her like garbage. By the time I left the casino, I knew everything I needed to know about Andrew Phillips. Now it was time to use that information. I chose a Tuesday for the confrontation, partly because I knew Andrew would be at his usual restaurant for lunch, and partly because Tuesday seemed like the kind of day when a man's life should fall apart. Mondays are too obvious, and Fridays are too merciful. They give you the weekend to recover. Tuesday is the day when you realize that the week is going to be long and painful, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early and took a table with a clear view of the entrance. At exactly 12:30, Andrew Phillips walked in, looking like he owned the place. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and he had that particular swagger that comes from thinking you're untouchable. He sat at his usual table and ordered his usual meal: salmon, no sauce, side salad, sparkling water. A man of predictable habits, which made him easy to hunt. I waited until he was halfway through his meal, then walked over to his table. "Andrew Phillips?" I said. He looked up, annoyed at being interrupted. "Yes?" "Bob Mitchell," I said, extending my hand. "Marta's husband." The fork fell from his fingers and clattered on his plate. "Oh, crap. Mind if I sit down?" I asked, but I was already pulling out the chair across from him. Andrew glanced around the restaurant, probably looking for exits. "Look, Mr. Mitchell." "Bob," I said. "We're going to be talking for a while. Might as well be on a first-name basis." "Bob," he said carefully. "I think there might be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," I said, pulling out my phone. "I've got pictures." I showed him a photo I'd taken of him and Marta kissing outside the restaurant the week before. His face went pale. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to know how long you've been screwing my wife." Andrew looked around again, clearly uncomfortable with my volume. "Could you keep your voice down?" "Sure," I said, leaning forward and lowering my voice to a whisper. "How long have you been screwing my wife?" 6 months, he said quietly. "Maybe 7. And you knew she was married?" "Yes." "Did you know she was also screwing my brother?" Andrew's eyes widened. "What? Oh, you didn't know about Alan?" I said, genuinely surprised. "Interesting, so you thought you were her only side piece. That must be embarrassing." "I don't understand." I pulled out another photo, this one showing Alan and Marta together in the attic. "My brother," I explained. "They've been at it for 20 years. You're just the latest addition to her collection." Andrew stared at the photo like it was written in a foreign language. 20 years? 20 years, I confirmed. Long enough to produce a daughter. My daughter, actually, except she's not really mine. She's his. Jesus Christ. Indeed. I put my phone away and leaned back in my chair. "So here's what's going to happen, Andrew. You're going to stop seeing my wife. You're going to stop calling her, texting her, sending her champagne, whatever it is you do. You're going to pretend she doesn't exist." "Okay," he said quickly. "Yes, absolutely. I had no idea." "I'm not finished," I said. "You're also going to resign from Brennan and Associates." "What? I can't do that. I'm a partner." "You're a partner who's been sleeping with a subordinate," I said. "I'm sure the other partners would be very interested to hear about that. I'm also sure your ex-wife would be interested to know why your alimony payments have been late. Gambling debts are a witch, aren't they?" Andrew went very still. "How do you know about that?" "I know lots of things," I said. "I know you owe money to some very unpleasant people. I know you've been skimming from client accounts to pay your debts. I know about the attack charge that got swept under the rug." "You can't prove any of that." "Can I?" I pulled out a manila envelope and slid it across the table. "Bank records, Casino receipts, police reports. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Andrew opened the envelope with shaking hands. His face went from pale to gray as he flipped through the documents. "What do you want?" he asked again. "I told you what I want. I want you to disappear. Resign from the agency, leave town, start over somewhere else, preferably somewhere far away. And if I don't, then I send copies of these documents to your business partners, your ex-wife, your creditors, and anyone else who might be interested. I also make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of man you are." Andrew was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers in his hands. Finally, he looked up at me. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone weaker, I guess. Marta always made it sound like you were passive." "Marta doesn't know me as well as she thinks she does," I said, standing up. "You've got 48 hours to clean out your office. After that, I start making phone calls." I left him sitting there with his cold salmon and his shattered illusions, and I felt better than I had in weeks. That evening, I went home to find Marta waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked like she'd been crying, which was a nice touch, but about 20 years too late to be effective. "We need to talk," she said. "No," I said, "we don't." "Andrew called me," she said. "He told me what you did." "Good. Saves me the trouble of explaining it." "Bob, please. I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" I interrupted. "Angry doesn't begin to cover what I am. I'm furious. I'm devastated. I'm humiliated. But mostly I'm done." "We can fix this," she said desperately. "We can go to counseling. We can work through it." "There's nothing to work through," I said. "You've been lying to me for 20 years. You've been sleeping with my brother for 20 years. You had a child with him and let me believe she was mine. You've been having affairs with God knows how many other men. There's no coming back from that." "I love you," she said, and for a moment she almost sounded like she meant it. "No," I said, "you don't. You love the idea of me. You love having a stable home and a reliable income and someone to take care of you while you play around with other men. But you don't love me." Marta started crying again, harder this time. "What about the kids? What about them? This will destroy them. You should have thought about that before you decided to turn our family into a lie." I walked past her toward the stairs, then stopped and turned back. "Oh, and Marta, pack your things. I want you out by the end of the week." "This is my house too," she said. "Actually," I said, "it's not. I bought this house before we got married. It's in my name only. Check the deed if you don't believe me." I left her standing in the kitchen and went upstairs to pack a bag. I'd be staying at the hotel for a few more days until she was gone. I didn't trust myself to be in the same house with her, and I didn't trust her not to do something desperate. As I was packing, my phone rang. It was Ross. "Dad," he said, "I heard about what happened with that guy from Mom's work." "News travels fast in this town," I said. "Are you okay?" "I'm getting there," I said. "How are you doing with all this?" "Honestly, I'm angry. I'm angry at Mom. I'm angry at Uncle Alan. I'm angry at the whole situation. But I'm proud of you." "Proud of me?" "For standing up for yourself, for not just rolling over and taking it." "Thanks, son. That means a lot." "Dad, what's going to happen now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But whatever happens, we'll get through it. All of us." After I hung up, I finished packing and headed for the door. As I was leaving, I noticed that the attic light was on again. I climbed up to take one last look at the scene of the crime. The love nest was gone. The bed, the mini fridge, the string lights, all of it had been removed, leaving nothing but bare plywood and the smell of guilt. But I'd taken pictures, and pictures don't lie. I turned off the light and climbed back down. Tomorrow, I'd start the final phase of my plan. Tonight, I just wanted to sleep without wondering who my wife was with. Andrew Phillips resigned from Brennan and Associates on Thursday morning, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue new opportunities. By Thursday afternoon, everyone at the agency knew the real reason, thanks to a few strategic phone calls I'd made to people who couldn't keep their mouths shut if their lives depended on it. Marta called me 6 times that day. I didn't answer. On Friday, she showed up at my office, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing the same clothes she'd worn the day before. "You destroyed him," she said without preamble. "Hello to you too," I said, not looking up from my paperwork. "Andrew lost his job, his reputation, everything. He's leaving town." "Good," I said. "Maybe he'll learn to keep his hands off other men's wives." "You had no right." "I had every right." I said, finally looking at her. He was sleeping with my wife. That gives me all the rights I need. Marta slumped into the chair across from my desk. What about us, Bob? What about our marriage? Our marriage ended 20 years ago, I said. I just didn't get the memo. It doesn't have to be over. We can start fresh. We can... Marta, I said gently, stop. Just stop. It's over. Accept it and move on. She started crying again, the kind of desperate, ugly crying that comes from realizing that your actions have consequences. I watched her fall apart and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, not even anger anymore. Just emptiness. I filed for divorce, I said when her sobs subsided. You'll be served with papers next week. I won't sign them. You don't have to. Ohio allows for uncontested divorce after a separation period. I can wait. The kids will hate you for this. The kids will understand, I said. Eventually. Marta wiped her eyes with a tissue from the box on my desk. What about Alan? What about him? Are you going to destroy him too? I considered the question. Alan was family or had been family, which made the betrayal worse, but also made the revenge more complicated. He was also Amelia's biological father, which gave him a connection to my daughter that I couldn't simply erase. Alan and I will have our own conversation, I said finally. That conversation happened on Saturday morning. I drove to the apartment he was renting across town, a shabby one-bedroom place that smelled like cigarettes and failure. Alan answered the door in his underwear, looking like he'd been hit by a truck. Bobby, he said, stepping aside to let me in. I've been expecting you. The apartment was a mess. Empty beer bottles on every surface, dirty clothes scattered around, the kind of chaos that comes from a life falling apart. Alan cleared a space on the couch and gestured for me to sit. You look like crap, I said. Feel like it too, he admitted. Want a beer? It's 10 in the morning. So? Sure. Why not? He brought me a beer and sat down across from me. We drank in silence for a few minutes, two brothers who had nothing left to say to each other. How long? I asked finally. You mean with Marta? I mean all of it. The affair, the lies, pretending to be my friend while you were sleeping with my wife. Alan stared at his beer bottle. It started about 6 months after you got married. Marta was lonely. You were working all the time. I was going through my divorce. It just happened. Bullcrap. Things like that don't just happen. You make choices. You're right, he said. I made choices. Bad choices. Every day for 20 years, I made the choice to betray you. Why? Alan was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was jealous, he said. You had everything I wanted. A successful business, a beautiful wife, a nice house, kids who looked up to you. I had nothing, so I took what I could. You took my life. I know. You let me raise your daughter. She's your daughter too, Alan said quickly. Biology doesn't... Don't, I said. Don't you dare tell me that biology doesn't matter. If biology doesn't matter, then why didn't you tell me the truth 20 years ago? Alan had no answer for that. I loved you like a brother, I said. I trusted you. I let you into my home, my family, my life, and you repaid that trust by screwing my wife and lying to me for 2 decades. I know, Alan said again. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry, Bobby. If I could take it all back... But you can't, I said, standing up. You can't take it back, and I can't forgive it. What happens now? I looked around the apartment, taking in the squalor and desperation. Now you live with the consequences of your choices. You stay away from me. You stay away from my house, and you figure out how to be a father to Amelia without being a brother to me. And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are. I'll make sure you can't get a job, can't get credit, can't show your face in public without people whispering about you. Alan nodded slowly. I understand. Good. I headed for the door, then stopped and turned back. One more thing. If you ever hurt Amelia, if you disappoint her or let her down or make her feel like she's not important, I will destroy you, completely and permanently. Are we clear? Crystal, Alan said. I left him sitting in his squalid apartment and drove home, where I found Amelia waiting for me on the front porch. She'd been crying, but she'd stopped by the time I pulled into the driveway. Hi, Dad, she said as I walked up the steps. Hi, sweetheart, what are you doing here? I came to see you, to talk. We went inside and sat in the living room, the same room where I'd revealed the truth about her parentage just a week earlier. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I've been thinking about what you said," Amelia began, "about how I'll always be your daughter." "That's not something you need to think about," I said. "It's just true." "But I'm also his daughter. Alan's." "Yes, and that makes everything complicated." "Yes, it does." Amelia was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. "I don't know how to feel about any of this. I'm angry at Mom for lying to me. I'm angry at Alan for everything. But I'm also confused because part of me always felt like there was something different about our family, and now I know what it was." "What do you mean?" "The way Alan looked at me sometimes. The way he always remembered my birthday and brought me presents that were too expensive. The way he got upset when boys started calling the house." She looked up at me. "He was acting like a father, wasn't he?" "I think so, yes. And you never suspected?" "I suspected something," I said honestly. "But I chose to believe that my wife and my brother were better people than they turned out to be." Amelia nodded. "What happens now? With us, I mean. With our family?" "I don't know," I said. "We'll figure it out as we go." "Will you still pay for my college?" "Of course. Even though I'm not really your daughter?" I reached over and took her hand. "Amelia, listen to me very carefully. You are my daughter in every way that matters. I changed your diapers. I taught you to walk. I scared away the monsters under your bed. I was there for your first day of school, your first heartbreak, your graduation. That doesn't change because of a DNA test." She started crying again, but these were different tears, tears of relief rather than grief. "I love you, Dad," she said. "I love you too, sweetheart. Always." We sat there for a while, holding hands and figuring out how to be a family in the aftermath of betrayal. It wasn't easy and it wasn't perfect, but it was honest in a way our family hadn't been for 20 years. Later that evening, after Amelia had gone home, I walked through the house one last time before Marta moved out. 22 years of marriage, reduced to boxes and moving trucks. I found myself in our bedroom, looking at the bed where we'd made love and made plans and made the mistake of thinking we knew each other. On Marta's nightstand, I found a letter addressed to me. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Bob," it began, "I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to. But I need you to know that I did love you, in my own broken way. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, and I know it doesn't change anything, but it's true. You deserve better than me. You deserve better than all of this. I'm sorry. Marta." I read the letter twice, then tore it up and threw it in the trash. Too little, too late, and probably not even true. But it was something, I supposed. A small acknowledgement of the wreckage she'd left behind. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room and realized that for the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. The anger was still there, and the hurt, and the sense of betrayal. But underneath all of that was something new, the possibility of starting over. I was 48 years old, divorced, and alone, but I was also free. And that, I thought as I got dressed and prepared to face the first day of the rest of my life, was worth something.